Professor Jennie Sumelius, Professor in Management and Organization, and I invite you now to the podium.
Rector, Dean of Research, dear colleagues, Hanke-Itar, ladies and gentlemen. As many, maybe even most of us have experienced ourselves, white-collar knowledge work has undergone major changes over the past few years. We're experiencing a technology-driven fourth industrial revolution, characterized, for example, by an increasing blurring of the physical and the digital worlds. Mobile, virtual, and cloud technologies in particular have disrupted and continue to disrupt the way in which white-collar work is done. One central implication of these developments is that work has become increasingly disconnected from time and place, as it's now possible to carry out most knowledge-intensive tasks on our own laptops from any location and at any time. We're no longer bound to a physical office or workplace in the same way as we have been for the past decades, and we're also not equally bound to traditional working hours of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Remote work and hybrid work, combining office-based work with working from home or a third place, have quickly become regular, most likely permanent features of working life. When talking of these things, it's important to note that work changing is nothing new as such. That's always been the case, and especially as new technologies develop, it leads to changes in how work is carried out. Also, these current changes in white-collar work have not happened overnight. The disconnection of work from time and place has been developing over a longer time, but the COVID-19 pandemic has influenced the pace of this development and served to accelerate and intensify it significantly. The changes in how work is carried out also naturally have consequences for organizations and their human resource management, so how work is led and how people are managed. Existing practices that have been developed in a context where most work takes place in the corporate offices during office hours may prove less useful in the future, and so we need to shift our focus from the effectiveness of current practices towards understanding what the new time and place-independent ways of working mean for HR. Shortly before the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, we started an Academy of Finland-funded research project together with colleagues from the University of Vaasa and Aalto, in particular Hertta Vuorenmaa. The purpose of that project was to study the changing nature of white-collar work and the implications of this for people management in large Finnish multinational companies. We conducted qualitative interviews with human resource directors in 35 of the 50 largest Finnish MNCs, in which we discussed their views on how work is changing and what challenges this raises for them. Since then, we've been able to revisit these same top managers a few times, and we've talked to them both during the intense phases of the pandemic as well as after that. I thought I'd share some of their thoughts and insights here today. In our talks, one key question that the HR managers kept getting back to was, in the midst of all the ongoing change, which for many people is something that they find difficult and also often scary. So in the midst of this change, how can we ensure that we get our people, our employees, to remain engaged? And their answer to this question was basically, if you want people to feel engaged, you need to make sure that they feel included. And here, feeling included means people feeling that they can make sense of their work and the work context, that they can participate and contribute despite all the ongoing upheaval. And so, for the organization, and in this case for the HR managers, it's important to be aware of what the perceived obstacles for feeling included are in the own organization. One of the key obstacles that managers mentioned was skills related. starting, for example, from fairly basic things, such as making sure, rather than assuming, that employees have sufficient technical skills in terms of knowing how to use different software, platforms, etc., but also in terms of ensuring that they have the necessary teleworking abilities and digital communication skills to enable virtual work. And this includes acknowledging that hybrid work in itself is actually a skill, so something that cannot be taken for granted and assumed to work automatically. Rather, the frames of it may need to be discussed within teams, common rules agreed on, and so on, in order for it to work well. Concerning training and skills, the HR managers we talked to all emphasized the importance of continuous lifelong learning, which they agreed is increasingly a necessity in all areas of work. And it's clear that upskilling and investments in training and development are high on the strategic agenda of most of these organizations. What they perceived as more challenging was understanding what kinds of skills and competences will be most important for white-collar employees going forward. Also in the literature, there is disagreement about what exactly current shifts mean for white-collar knowledge worker competency profiles, with conflicting predictions about the need for so-called soft or hard skills. Some stress the importance of skills such as problem solving and logical thinking, while others predict that skills such as creativity and emotional intelligence will hold increasing significance in the coming decades. Yet others place emphasis on the need for digital skills such as IT competencies, teleworking abilities, and digital communication skills. Perhaps not surprisingly, the HR managers in our case organizations raised the importance of all of these. The breadth of needed skills means that HR needs to adopt a broad, holistic perspective when analyzing and planning organizational training and development needs and investments. Regarding hard skills, the HR managers discussed, for example, that the increasing automation of certain less complex work tasks shifts human labor to more meaningful, but also more cognitively demanding work tasks, which highlights the importance of high-level cognitive competencies and data analytics. They also emphasize the importance of data-centric competencies, such as understanding data, applying data, crunching data. So the importance of being able to translate and leverage vast quantities of unstructured and unusable data into valuable insights that inform and direct decision-making in organizations. But most of all, the HR managers emphasize the need for softer competencies. The increasing disconnection between work and time and work and place has blurred the boundaries of work and non-work time. On the one hand, this allows for a more blended, multi-purpose timetable in which individuals have more freedom to choose and alternate between work and leisure time. This increased time flexibility can help reduce or avoid commuting times and facilitates the management of personal matters during the day. In this sense, time autonomy facilitates, for example, employee well-being. On the other hand, research shows that work during evening and weekend hours has significantly increased, and the growing norm of constant availability has led to new concerns, such as collaborative overload, work-family conflict, stress, and exhaustion. So the thing the HR managers emphasized the most was the need for employees to possess self-leadership skills in order to regulate their work-life balance and to self-manage their work projects autonomously. And very many of them also said that while previously, in the earlier days of virtual work, there was perhaps a concern that employees working from home were in fact focusing on other non-work-related things. Today, they were not worried about that. Rather the opposite. They were increasingly worried about people not regulating their work-life balance enough. The mental burden of balancing job demands and resources and the pressure to be constantly available and reachable were considered as central concerns for the well-being of employees. This also links to the broader issue of the social sustainability of work and work life today. People's working careers are becoming longer. The increased blurriness of work-life boundaries that comes with technological developments means that an increasingly urgent issue for HR is to develop policies and practices to protect and look after employee well-being in more proactive and continuous ways before occupational healthcare interventions are needed. Ensuring that people feel included and have the necessary skills and opportunities to fully participate in and contribute to the organization in the changing context of work is already a considerable challenge. Yet another thing that came through clearly in our talks with the managers was that organizing work has become more complex and heterogeneous than before. A large part of this complexity comes from the large differences between how people and employees see the ongoing changes. For example, virtual work is something that divides people strongly. Some love it, some hate it, some manage it easily, others struggle severely in terms of making it work. A key challenge for HR managers is balancing the individual needs and the preferences of employees and line managers with those of the organization. For example, while an individual preference may be to work from home, with the thought that I can do my tasks from home, that works for me, I don't need to come to the office. This needs to be considered from the organizational perspective. What does a certain job include? How is it defined? If it's a matter of carrying out certain specified work tasks, the individual may well be able to do these things virtually. But what about things like the role of an individual as a member of the wider organizational job community? How can we contribute to supporting and helping others in different roles and phases of their careers? Similarly, how, if at all, does a virtual and hybrid way of working change people's need to belong to a work community? For some, this need may decrease. For others, they may still want to belong. Can and/or should focus lie on creating an organizational core community of people who want to belong, while accepting that some don't and perhaps don't need to? How is it possible to maintain trust and friendliness and empathy among people if they never meet? This was not perceived to be a problem for existing relationships and existing teams, but it was raised as a concern in the context of people establishing new contacts and new relationships. As you can hear, the list of new questions arising for HR and organizations more generally as a result of changing work is long and continues well beyond these examples. I have now shared with you some of the insights that arose from our interviews with HR directors of some of the largest Finnish corporations. While the changing nature of white-collar work carries many implications for the work of these HR managers, the issues mentioned here today are by no means restricted to the domain of HR alone or to the responsibility of HR managers. There is strong consensus in global research on changing work that if we want to use the opportunities offered by new technologies, if we want the future of work to be socially sustainable and better for us all, we need to work simultaneously on individual, organizational, and societal levels. Everyone needs to actively work towards adaptation and collaborate in rethinking the way we do, organize, and lead work. On the societal level, the institutions around work, for example, employment laws, need to change to better support and facilitate the changing labor market, and the institutions around work also need to provide incentives for organizations to rethink and develop their internal structures. On an organizational level, companies need to consider things like how to redefine efficiency and performance, how to facilitate learning and hybrid work to make it possible for individuals to take agency of their own work and their own learning, and thus adapt to all the ongoing change the best they can. This can serve to create a positive cycle of change across the globe and move us all towards a brighter and more sustainable, socially sustainable future of work. Thank you.